Welcome. Thank you very much, all of you, for coming. I realize that it is late and it is a Friday and it is fantastic weather outside. So thank you, genuinely thank you.
We should all be outside.
It is because our panelists are so fantastic is why everyone's here. So this is the final event of our Law Day activities we've had over the last few days, and some of which have been done in conjunction with the Center for Women and Gender Studies and the Body Politic events that they've had the last few days. And I think we've had really good turnout at these. We've had really good conversations. I hope some of you were able to attend some of those other events. I found them. Speaking for myself, I found them very interesting, and I'm leaving here as per usual when I come to the Dartmouth campus, but all energized and ready to go out and thank you, and to be re-inspired. So I want to thank Dartmouth for letting us come and have these events, and for letting us have this panel today. My name is Xander Mize-Bay. I'm the president of the Dartmouth Lawyers Association. We have three fantastic panelists here to talk about their careers in law today. The first we have is Sue Finnegan on the end in the red blazer. She is the pro bono partner at Mintz Levin in Boston, Massachusetts. She is, well, I should say, you currently serve as the chair of the pro bono department, if there, yes, at the firm. And you have been overseeing 400 varied cases in that capacity over the years, and have done a significant amount of work on pro bono cases involving sexual assault and domestic violence. Next is Sarah Marlowe, who is an associate in Vitt, Brannan, and Loftus in Norwich, just down the block. Sarah graduated from Dartmouth as a psychology major, and after college she explored career opportunities in production, stagecraft, and social work with at-risk children. I'm going to keep these descriptions rather short because our panelists are going to share with us their experiences on their path to college. So I'm sure we'll have some questions for Sarah as to how that led to law school. And finally, on the end here, Julie Connolly, who recently started her own firm in Concord, New Hampshire. But she has extensive experience in private practice, as well as an assistant attorney general at the New Hampshire Department of Justice, as a federal clerk at both the U.S. District Court of New Hampshire level and on the First Circuit Court of Appeals. In the interest of full disclosure, I should say that Julie and I were clerks together on the First Circuit. And also you worked for several years as the pro se clerk, right, for the federal court. So with that, I'm going to be quiet because I want us to spend our time having you talk about your experiences. And what we're going to do today is start out with each of our panelists speaking for a few minutes about why they went to law school, what their career path took from law school to now. We're then going to address a few general questions, but I want to make sure that we leave time at the end for your questions and audience questions. And so please do feel free to make this a discussion. That is part of why we have these kinds of panels, because we know students have questions about these issues. So Sue, if you wouldn't mind starting off there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Xander. And thanks for having us up. It's wonderful to be in Hanover, and wonderful to see students and others from the community here. As Xander mentioned, I graduated in '85, and I guess I'm supposed to talk a little bit about what I did after college, but I think it's also instructive to know what I did on campus and what led me to go to law school. I was very interested. I was a government major here at Dartmouth and did a lot of policy work, although it was really at the beginning of the Rocky Center here, and there really weren't as many, there wasn't a policy minor, public policy minor, but I took as many courses as I could in the policy arena, and I was very interested in women in politics and women in policy. And so I tried to take as many courses on gender issues as well. So I thought when I was in law school, I definitely thought that I was going to go straight from Dartmouth to law school. But I ended up taking a few years off, and I went, as most people did in the mid-'80s, went to New York City and worked for an ad agency for a couple of years, and decided after a few years of that I definitely wanted to go to law school, and ended up coming back to Boston and went to Boston College Law School for 3 years, and then I clerked, much like Xander and Julie did. We clerked both at the Federal District Court for a judge, and then clerked at the Supreme Judicial Court in Massachusetts. And both were incredible opportunities. If you do decide to go to law school and you have an opportunity to clerk for a judge, no matter what you want to do with your career, I would definitely give anyone the advice to do that. Because you get really to know, not only to know your judge, but you get to know the staff of the court, you get to know how a court works, and it kind of demystifies the whole process. I then went I had thought when I was in law school that I definitely was going to do public interest law or public sector law, but my mounting debts kind of got higher and higher, and I kind of postponed the inevitable for 2 years while I was clerking, and I decided to figure out if I was going to go to a law firm, like how would I find a law firm that would be the right fit for me, because I knew I wanted to do a lot of pro bono work in a lot of areas like women's issues. And so I chose to go to Mintz-Levin, which is a full-service law firm in Boston, has about 450 lawyers right now in 8 different offices. And I did the kind of traditional route of working as an associate and then became a partner in the litigation section. At the same time, doing all those cases, my paid clients, I worked a lot with domestic violence survivors, sexual assault survivors, homeless clients, and political asylees. So I did a lot of work in those areas as well. And then about 10 years into my career, I got approached by one of our nonprofit referral agencies that was working very closely with sexual assault survivors, and they asked me to come on board as their legal director. So I left the firm, took an 80% pay cut, and decided to something I really wanted to do, and was the legal director at the Victim Rights Law Center, a small nonprofit in Boston that provides civil legal services to sexual assault survivors. So I did that for 3 years, and then the firm asked me to come back in this new role of pro bono partner, which basically means that I was going to come back as a litigation partner, but I would work exclusively on pro bono work and train junior associates, work with the attorneys throughout the firm, and take on cases myself too. So I've been doing that since 2007. And as Xander mentioned, I chair the pro bono committee at the firm. I recently took on the role of hiring partner too, so I'm also the hiring partner at the firm. And have been involved a lot in the training of junior associates, and mostly training them through doing pro bono work, which has been really satisfying. And most of the work that I did currently I work on a lot of amicus briefs for the state level and the federal level. I do a lot of legislative work around sexual assault and domestic violence, and do a fair amount of work in the court system with survivors of both domestic violence and sexual assault. And over the last couple of years, I've worked on several political asylum and human rights cases too. So that's sort of in a nutshell my career.
Hi, my name is Sarah Marlowe, and as Xander said, I was a 2000 grad from here in the psychology department. I come from a family of doctors and teachers and social workers. So although I was very interested in all of those things, there was kind of a push in my family to be something different. And my family had a very interesting idea that lawyers make money. So they thought that would be an excellent career choice for me, so that I could become a successful lawyer and make a lot of money. I appreciate their sentiment and their good wishes for me. But you know, I did struggle with trying to figure out whether to actually continue with that law path or to go into some of my other interests, which included doing technical production for theatrical performances, concerts, those sorts of things, and also working somewhat in the social work vein with at-risk populations. So right after college, I spent about a year and a half working fairly exclusively doing technical theater. I was a member of the Theatrical Stage Union, still am actually, and I went on the road. I was the company manager for a children's theater company and toured for about 6 months. Then I came back and I started working for a nonprofit that worked with children with special needs. We worked with a lot of children with autism and a whole host of other challenges. And part of what we did was help integrate the programs that they were working on in the schools into their lives in the community, and to really get these children out and integrated into their community. I very much enjoyed that. Unfortunately, as sometimes is the case with nonprofits, this one was not financially viable in the long run, and so I had to make a choice what I was going to do next when that job ended. I did two things. I applied to law school, which was something I had considered along the years, but I thought, well, now's as good a time as any. And I applied for a job working with DCF in Vermont, which was called a variety of things before and after I worked there, but I think is still DCF. Basically, a job doing investigations into child abuse allegations. And then on the exact same day, I was offered the job doing child abuse investigations, and I received my acceptance letter for law school the exact same day. I accepted the job with the state in Vermont with the understanding that I was going to leave at the end of the year and go to law school. And so I investigated child abuse for a year, and then it was probably a good thing to take a break. I enjoyed that work as well, but it's fairly heartbreaking and hard to keep on top of things, and I'm sure you run into a lot of that as well. And then I started law school. I went to Vermont Law School just up the road. I had been living in this area for quite a while at that point. I owned a house. I was engaged, and I considered going elsewhere, but I also knew that I wanted to come back and work in this area, and I thought, well, I should apply and go to a law school where the professors work locally, are familiar with the local law, where they will bring in people to speak and talk to us and work with us who also work in this local area, and I can really start to build a community of professionals that I know by the time I graduate from law school. And so I think if I would, as a caveat to my introduction, I would say that for anyone considering this, if you know there's an area of the country that you want to work in when you're done, consider starting to build relationships with the professionals in that community. It will help you when you're trying to find a job. It may help you actually get a job. And it will help you in your first years when you don't know what the heck you're doing and you need someone to pick up the phone and say, how do I, whatever job it is you end up doing, how do I file this? Who do I call if I have a question? After law school, I passed the Vermont bar and I started working with a small firm in Norwich, the firm I'm still with. We practice mostly civil litigation, some employment law, and when you work in a small firm, especially in New England, I also call it whatever else comes in the door. So sometimes you just have to take whatever walks in your door and do the best you can with it. It's been a good challenge, and I'm now, I realized, coming up on 5 years in practice, and that's me.
Julie. Well, hi, everybody. I'm Julie Connelly. Thank you for including me in this event. I think my legal path has been a little bit unconventional compared to what most people do. In other words, going to law school and then getting some experience under your belt, and then considering having children as you get older. I instead, after I graduated from Dartmouth, I got married just a few years after I graduated, and I very quickly started to have children, and I now have 6. And so my legal career has been largely dominated by the need to balance being a lawyer and raising children. When I was at Dartmouth, I was an English major, and I actually didn't plan to go to law school. But coincidentally, I also was very interested in policy and public policy things. And when I remember when I was a senior, I applied to all of these places, all these NGOs and congressional committees and UN committees, and I got rejected everywhere because, and I got uniformly told, oh, I could get a job like as a secretary or an administrative assistant or something, but to come in and care about what I thought, I needed to go and get an advanced degree. And I needed to go get some experience, whether I was going to be an economist or a doctor or a lawyer or an architect, anything. So that got me, I got a job as a paralegal out of college, and I decided that I would go to law school. But I ended up getting married, as I mentioned, and I was going to go to law school, and then I realized that I was going to have a baby halfway through my first year of law school, so I delayed it. I had the child, and I started law school when my oldest child was 6 months old. That son is now 25. He actually graduated from Dartmouth in 2010 and now lives out in San Francisco, where he works in the high-tech industry. So I went to school. I was living in New York City at the time, married to a lawyer, and so I went to, and I had this baby, so I decided to go to Fordham because they had a night program. So I went to Fordham University School of Law, and I would take care of him during the day, and the nanny would arrive at 5, and I'd hop on the subway and get up to Lincoln Center, and at 6 o'clock I'd go to class from 6 to 9, and then I'd study till midnight or 2, and get up the next day and do it all over again. And then after 2 years, I had a second child during the summer after my second year of law school. And my husband and I both had wanted to leave New York. We didn't want to raise our kids there. My husband wanted to get a job as a prosecutor, so for personal and professional reasons, we actually moved to New Hampshire, where he got a job at the U.S. Attorney's Office. And that was in 1991, and I thought we would rent a house and be here as short as possible, and now 21 years later, we're still here. But I went back to law school. I took a year off. My second son was born in August, and I took a year off because I had a newborn and we were moving. And then I went back, and I actually commuted down to Fordham for a semester because I needed to get enough credits there. And then I wrapped up at what was at the time called Franklin Pierce School of Law in Concord, New Hampshire, because that's where I lived. It's now called the University of New Hampshire School of Law. And I finished at Christmas time, and my third child was born on January 31st. So I very much had children while I was going through law school, and it's doable.
Sort of. I can't imagine.
And then I clerked. I took a few months off because I had a clerkship lined up, and I started clerking. I spent a year clerking for Judge McAuliffe at the district court. And then I took a year after that, and I worked at the New Hampshire Attorney General's office. And in that capacity, I was in the criminal bureau in the appellate division, and I wrote and argued briefs before the New Hampshire Supreme Court. And then my fourth baby was born on Christmas, and then I got a job part-time as the pro se law clerk at the federal court in Concord. And then I had a fifth child, and then when I was pregnant with my sixth, and I had gone through 3 nannies in 18 months, I decided the writing was on the wall, and I needed to step back and take care of my 6 children. So I did that for about 5 years. I stayed home full time, and then I got called by the federal court to see if I would be interested in coming back. And I did, and it was a wonderful way to re-enter the professional world because being a clerk is a fairly academic job, so it enabled me to sharpen my research and writing skills. And the other great thing about clerking, and the reason I did it for so long, is it's a very controllable job, unlike being in a private firm where you're owned by the partner or the client and you can work whenever they want you to. This was much more, it's a government job, and so sometimes I would work 60 hours a week, but generally it was a 40-hour work week, and it was right near my home. And so I was able to raise these children and still keep my foot in the profession. And what I wanted to do, throughout all of this time, I'm an 84. I've been, my oldest son is 25, and throughout this time, I've always sort of been challenged by how do I keep my profession, how do I value my family and raise my children without losing myself and still keep my foot in the professional world. One of the nice things about going to law school is that it's a professional degree. You have a specific body of knowledge, and it makes you marketable. So it's something that you actually, there's a demand for. It's not, that not everybody has, and so it's a good set of tools to have. But then after clerking for so many years, my children are now, my second son is graduating from Boston College in a couple of weeks, and then my daughter's 20 and she's at BC also, and then I have a 17-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 12-year-old still at home. So I wanted to leave clerking And my husband is a lawyer too, and he works a lot. He's a partner in a private law firm. So I have always been the principal caregiver. And so I wanted to do something, but I still needed a lot of flexibility and a lot of control over my schedule, which is what prompted me to open up my own practice. And I specialize in litigation. And in that capacity, I do whatever, like Sarah just said, walks in the door, but I'm specializing in personal injury, business litigation, divorce, matrimonial, these are the type of things that come in, and appellate advocacy. I also am on the First Circuit panel for lawyers that represent indigent defendants before the court. It's called the Criminal Justice Act panel. I'm on that panel. And I recently joined the New Hampshire pro bono, the New Hampshire Bar Association pro bono project that's called DOVE, which provides free legal services for victims of domestic violence, coincidentally. So I'm able, as having my own practice, to start to get back into the policy things that I was interested in, and help the poor, which is something I've wanted to be able to do, and still I can control my schedule, still get my business, and still get to the myriad of lacrosse and basketball and whatever games I have to get to. So that's me.
Well, thank you. Perhaps you can now understand why I wanted them to discuss their own histories, because they, there may be only 3 people at this table, but there are, I must count like 7, 8, 9, 10 different jobs and experiences that that those here have had. And I think Julie started to touch upon some of perhaps the issues that go to what we initially titled this panel, which was having it all in law, questions and reflections on legal careers. And so a question that I would like to hear about from our panelists is, what might it mean to have it all? This is something that has come up in the last few days with some of these other events and these ideas of professional women and women in leadership. But I think the idea of having it all is not just a women's issue. It is something that anyone who is in a demanding career that requires a lot of schooling like law, I think, struggles with. And so we're interested to hear your thoughts on it in whatever order you wish to address it.
Who wants to go first? Do you want to go first?
Sure. Sarah?
Happy to. Okay. This is actually a conversation that has come up very often in my own home recently, and I think I have found that in the profession, in the legal profession, at least the way I experienced it, and possibly also as a result of being a Dartmouth student, that there was a push towards being the partner in a big firm, being a CEO, being a high-powered executive in a large organization. And that, I felt like initially that was what I was supposed to do if I was going to be successful. So looking down at towards the end of my career, if I would get to the, in order to get to the end of my career and say I was successful in what I chose to do, which ultimately was law, I would need to be a partner in a large law firm. I would need, I would need to have one of those markers, be a judge, be something very public, something very recognizable, and something very much top of the food chain in my profession. I think what I've come to understand about myself is that although that may have been the goal I felt like I was receiving from the profession, it was not my goal. And that for me, having it all was finding a way to blend all of these interests in my life. And that includes my family. I don't have 6 children, but I do have a 2.5-year-old at home. And with one 2.5-year-old, I am in awe of anyone that survives 6 children, let alone works in a high-powered profession with them. But I wanted to find a way to be present at home and be there for my child and engage myself academically and intellectually and continue in the legal profession, which really is a very interesting profession. You are presented with all kinds of different problems that you have to figure out how to solve. And sometimes there's a clear path, but most often you're just kind of throwing up your hands and going, okay, what can we do with this? How can I get to this result that this client is hoping I can fix this problem for them? And then, you've also heard I had these other loves with theater and social work and helping people and the arts and just doing all kinds of different things. And I love small towns. I'm not really a city person, and a lot of the larger firms and larger companies are conveniently located in very large cities. So I've been thinking a lot about how I can shape my ultimate career. I've been in practice for 5 years, and where I am now may or may not be where I'll be in 20 years, but I've been thinking very hard about how to shape my career to best combine all of those things.
I think that I completely agree with Sarah's point that this concept of having it all depends on what you decide is what all is for you. And we all have picked different paths. This topic has become very popular, especially among women, because of the recent articles, the Anne Marie Slaughter article and the Sheryl Sandberg book, and then Marissa Mayer, the Yahoo CEO, who went back to work after 2 weeks. These women, by all accounts, are incredible people. Forget about the fact that they're women. What they've achieved is admirable regardless of their gender, and they necessarily had to have that kind of accomplishment necessarily requires tremendous personal sacrifice. And that doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman trying to achieve that. And those women have sacrificed a lot. Not that they haven't, I'm sure they're thrilled with where they are, but they don't have it all. By definition, nobody does, and you all sitting in this room know that. I mean, you don't get into Dartmouth without having made a lot of sacrifices to achieve what you did. So there's no such thing as a free lunch. And I guess my thinking is that if you're lucky enough to find a partner in life who you can agree on the values that you want to share and the goals you want to achieve, then you can figure out your balance between the two of you on how much time you want to devote to the various things you're interested in.
Yeah, it's interesting too, just thinking a lot about these recent articles and also just reflecting on my own experience when I was a student at Dartmouth. I don't think I spent any time talking about balancing work and family. I just assumed that it would all happen. And I don't think in the 80s we didn't talk about like these issues very much, because we just assumed that we'd have a family, would have this great high-powered career, and everything would just all work out. And that's just really not the way life kind of plays out, I think, sometimes. So I have 2 children. I only have 2 children. We were kind of not worthy.
No.
We have kids, but I have 2 teenage boys.
I have a pet turtle.
I have a 13-year-old.
Yeah, but you're a partner at Mintz Levin, and you're a partner at your firm, I'm not a partner.
I'm an associate. I'm still an associate.
So I think that I have 2 teenage boys, one 13, one 15, and I have to say I've made different career choices along the way, but certainly it is hard to try to balance all these things. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't. But I do think that you have to kind of have your own definition of what's important to you, and kind of have that be your guide, because I think it's hard, particularly as a woman in this profession. It's a very, at least in law firm life, it's a very male-dominated still profession.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a litigation partner. There are probably 55 partners in the litigation section. As of maybe 5 years ago, there were only 5 women in that group, and now through some effort, there's now maybe 8 or 9, but still we're a minority, and if a couple don't come to a meeting, you might be the only woman in the room. Still.
Yeah,
So,
I apologize to interrupt,
yeah.
but stat-wise, I will say that that's pretty consistent with large law firms. There's a ranking called sort of the AM Law, American Law Magazine 100, or the AM Law 200, and that kind of thing. And the statistic is that partners are only 18% women.
Yeah, right.
So you
So I think, when I think about things, I agree that you have to have your own kind of compass to where you think, what you think is important, but you also have to find something that you love and do it, because it is hard trying to balance it all. I really love what I do. I love being a lawyer, and I love that I'm able to be at an institution that allows me to do a really interesting and amazing job of helping low-income people. And so, to me, you know, it might mean that I have to stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning a couple nights a week so that I can go home and have dinner with my kids and then stay up late. But to me, that's worth it, because I'm able to really do some really interesting work and feel really, and also be a part of my family too, which is very important to me. So I think that's part of it. I think the other piece is just finding something there where you can have control over how you spend your time. And I think that, we'll get into this probably in a few minutes about the law firm profession, the profession of being a lawyer generally. But I think for many lawyers, they don't have control over their time. And so that makes it very difficult to have any kind of balance in your life. In my position now, I don't have to bill my time. I can sort of decide, you know, if I take on a project, it's kind of my own fault that I'm staying up late because I'm taking on that project, but I feel like that's an important thing to do. So I think that's, if you can find something that you have more control over your life, I think that makes it a little bit easier to have some kind of balance. And I think Julie hit upon something too. I think it is really important, if you want to have a partner in life, to choose very wisely about that choice, because I think to have someone that's willing to let you take on, you know, some of the challenges in your career and be there to pick up the kids, or just be able to be flexible about that, really makes a difference in being able to have it all, you know.
Yeah.
Critical.
If there was one thing you would tell the younger you, the one who applied to law school, if there was one thing that you know now that you wish you could have told that person then. Yes, I'm taking questions out of order. It's Friday afternoon. We're keeping
for that question.
We'll start with someone else, but perhaps Sarah, if you.
Wait, didn't I start the last
No,
one?
but you were closer to the microphone.
Okay.
You've-
All right, so I only get one thing to tell myself? Can it be a compound answer?
This is what happens when you bring lawyers in front of a group of people. Yes, you may use a compound.
I think, broad scope, I would tell myself to really sit down and think about my own personality, my own interests, my own goals, and what I wanted out of life, and to think ahead and try and shape my legal career, even from my choice of law school, to what I want that to be. I think I did that reasonably successfully, but I think I could have done more. I deliberately chose not to go to a law school in a large city, or to move away from home. I deliberately chose a smaller law school in the area where I lived, because I thought that was a better fit for what I was interested in doing, and I think that was a good choice for me. But I think as part of that, the part where I didn't give sufficient consideration was the impact of the cost of law school on the rest of your life, or really of any professional advanced degree. And I think I could have done better at choosing a school or choosing a way to do school that would have put me in a better position after school to have more options in what I could choose for a career. I did feel somewhat constrained coming out of law school to, you know, have a paying job.
That would be helpful, right?
I know, exactly. So, you know, perhaps not jumping in as the legal counsel for a tiny nonprofit that would barely be able to pay me minimum wage. That was not an option for me to do and pay student loans. Although maybe with all the financial things now, maybe you can now.
And better now. There are better options.
Yeah, so I
Loan
think
forgiveness.
to really think through, you know, before you take on, you know, if you're gonna take on advanced degree debt that requires you to have a $150,000 a year job, think about whether you would actually enjoy doing one of those $150,000 a year jobs. If what you're really interested in, the median salary is $30,000 or $50,000 or $70,000, you might want to think about keeping your debt in a level that's going to work with what you want to do so that you can be happy without stressing about the finances as much.
There's my
Julie?
compound question.
Answer.
What was the question again?
Did I speak for too long?
Wasn't sure I got it.
Yeah.
Something I regret?
No, not something that you
Tell
regret.
yourself.
But if what you wish you knew then. Is there something that you wish you could
Well,
tell?
she thinks, but I have one more point. When I was applying for law school, every single lawyer that I told that I was applying to law school looked at me and said, "Why?" And I thought, I wonder if they know something that I should know.
Yeah.
It was fairly universal. It was it started to worry me after a while. I think they were just overly cautious, but it did worry me.
I think the only thing, I'm very glad I went to law school. I think it gives you a huge variety of choices of things that you can do. I think we're examples of it, and we're 3 people. Even if you're a partner at a big firm, most of those people have done lots of things, and they also get to sit on committees and boards and are active in communities. It's a great education. I had actually paralegaled at some big New York City law firms, so I knew that it was a very time-intensive profession. But I think what I didn't realize was that even if you get out of the big law firm world, practicing law is just time-intensive. It's more time-intensive than I think I realized, that you just cannot produce first of all, you are selling your time. That's your commodity, is your time. And to deliver the quality, it just takes a lot of time. And when it's not a job that you can do effectively in 40 hours a week, even if you're not at a big New York law firm or a big DC law firm or something.
I guess the only thing I would add to both your 3-part answer and yours, I guess, is that there's really just, there's not really one way to do things. And I think when I was in law school, I think I was having worked at a big firm in Boston when I was on leave from Dartmouth, I told myself I will never work for a big firm, ever. And it actually caused me to delay my going to law school. And so during law school, I was very, I was one of those public interest people. I will never go to a law firm. And I think my career has taught me that, there are many ways to do things. And I don't regret at all going to the law firm for 10 years. I had a wonderful experience most of the time. And I learned a lot from really smart people, was able to do a lot of pro bono work, and learned a lot about myself. And so, and in saying that there's not just one way, I think the other thing is that my job now was not created. Like 30 years ago, 25 years ago when I was going to law school, there wasn't a job called a pro bono partner. And so I think you kind of have to be flexible in the future, because there are lots of jobs out there that, whether you go into law or not, that aren't even created yet. So I think you have to be kind of flexible and open-minded about different experiences.
Well, this is a perfect segue to our next question, because as you just said, your job didn't exist when you started. So in what ways has the profession changed? People have talked a lot about, well, actually, I'm going to call you now out on this. I see an iPhone, a BlackBerry. I have a BlackBerry over there. I have no doubt that Julie has a smartphone in her bag. And so advances.
Sell our notes.
So people have talked about technology as being a change that's happened in the profession and how that's affected people. There have been other changes in the legal profession now as far as it's contracting, or people are now doing different types of law. And so I think we'd be interested in hearing sort of your thoughts on how some of these changes have affected you and also affected the profession generally. And are there differences between how it's affected female attorneys versus male attorneys and that kind of thing?
I'll jump in if it's okay. I think the practice of law is very much a business now, and it's changed tremendously since I started, and you probably will feel the same way. I started practicing law in the early 90s, and at that time, the billable hour was part of the the way lawyers made their money, but it's sort of a relatively recent thing. We were talking about this on the phone. It's sort of a relatively recent concept of billing, billable hours, and billing. Your clients expect you to bill. You're billing by hours, and that actually, and having requirements and targets every month or every year for how many hours you have to bill. When I started, I think the target was something like 1,700. So now it's 1,950 or 2,000. So that's 300 more hours that you need to do.
Wrong times.
Yeah, and so that makes it, I think that has an impact both on men and women, but primarily for women of childbearing years who have to take some time off and also may want to go part-time, or men who want to go part-time, you're basically going at 80% of target to get back to where we were back in 1990, full-time. So I think that's a huge, huge change in terms of the billable hours going up, and the practice of law being more of a business than a profession. And the second way of that impacting women and men is that there's an expectation of being a producer of business that really, while it was true in the past, but especially at a big firm, it's not enough to work 2,000 hours a year, do excellent work, and be a wonderful provider of client service. You also, on top of that, you have to be out in the community. You have to have, you have a business plan, much like, a salesperson in any other profession. And so that piece of it has an impact, I think, more on women than men in terms of, people, an expectation of going out every morning for breakfast with someone, every lunch, every night out at a dinner. That does have an impact on being able, if you choose to have kids, that does have an impact. And third, technology you mentioned. While it's been a positive overall, people are tethered to Blackberries and iPhones, and their clients have an expectation that you are going to get back to them immediately. If they're paying you, my billable hour rate I think is $650 an hour. If someone's paying me $650 an hour, they're going to expect that I'm going to get back to them right away. Right. And so I think that is a real negative over time. When I first started practicing, you would FedEx something to someone, they would read it, you'd get that float of that night while the FedEx package was flying, or and so at least you had a little bit of time built in. So I think it's overall negative.
To explain for perhaps those who are not familiar with what this billable hour term means. So there are the hours that you work. You might think you work at a regular job. Let's say you show up at 9, you leave at 5, you maybe get a half an hour off in the middle. Great. Lawyers bill their time meaning they write down, okay, I have done X, Y, and Z for this client. And depending on the law firm, you might bill not in hours, but in 6-minute increments, or in 15-minute increments. But rare now is the law firm that will do 6. So 1/10 of an hour, 2/10 of an hour. Have I spent too long reading this email? Oh, maybe I should. Oh, wait, I spent some time drinking my latte. Was I really thinking about the case while? I'm not kidding. This is the type of sort of mental games that one goes through. And just because you were in the office between 9 and 5 does not mean you have a 9 to 5 worth of 6-minute increments that add up to that length of time. So when you start thinking about these hours, when Sue says 300 hours is it's 2 full months of billable time, which means you've probably been in the office for, let's say, 10 hours to get 7.5. It's amazing where those 6-minute increments disappear to that you can't account for. And so, yes, it's just to give some perspective on what that means, but.
Right, and technology, while it has been a good thing because it gives you flexibility, as Sue said, it's a bad thing because I've heard many clients say this, they expect immediate response. If you don't answer the phone, they know that their phone number has showed up. And so they know that you know that they want to talk to you.
No, it's true. I'll tell a story that's kind of. I was one of my last cases that I worked on before I left the firm. It was a white collar criminal case. So the defendant was clearly anxious. Okay, so we were getting ready for trial, and I just went to go to the bathroom, and I left my phone at my desk because you don't take your phone to the bathroom. And he called me, and he was so mad that I had not taken. He said, "From now on, you are taking your phone to the bathroom. I'm paying you X amount of dollars an hour." So sure enough, I took my phone to the bathroom every. So that's sort of the mentality that some. That if you're expecting instant. Yeah. I hope he wasn't expecting to pick up the phone, but.
Don't mind the flush.
Yeah, exactly right. I think
I don't have, I haven't been at this all of that long, so I haven't necessarily, I don't have the perspective to really say how it's changed, but I think, we do know I do know the rumors that float around when you start law school about how the profession has been or how it used to be, and it was, a typically male-dominated profession, and it was men working, 100 hours a week in big firms. At least that was kind of that's just kind of what you heard about. You didn't necessarily hear about the people that were working in the alternative jobs, and in the office all hours of the day and night. And I think I do like the flexibility that's come with technology, and I like the fact that firms appear to be considering options for how can we make life a little more flexible? How, can we give some of our employees a better work-life balance? Can we get more women into the profession? That these things have actually become conversations, which gives me hope that once they become conversations, they will find solutions. And, I have a huge love-hate relationship with this thing. I love the fact that technology allows me to work from home for a day or half of a day, either, just because I need to not be in an office full of people so I can focus on some project I'm trying to get done, or because my kid is homesick and I can't take a sick kid with a fever to daycare. And, it's nice to be able to have that option and to not have to be in the office. Or, we had a situation where my husband wanted to go take his father to visit his aunt, who was 94, I think, at the time. And my son was fairly young, and I needed to work. I had things that were going on that I had to work. I couldn't really have him home with me and get the work done that I needed to get done. But I also wasn't comfortable with my very young son flying off with my husband for a long weekend without me. So I was able, through the lovely benefits of technology, to take my laptop, take my phone, fly down with them to see this family member. And I sat in a room with my laptop for 8 or 9 hours a day, and then went to the pool with them and had dinner with them, and got to be part of that family experience that if I were stuck in the office, I wouldn't have been able to do. So as much as I hate the fact that I occasionally find myself answering emails at midnight, because why not? It's in front of me. I also love the flexibility it's given me.
I guess the only thing I'd add too is there are a couple of very positive things. And so I started, and they're positive. I think that the clients, your in-house clients, are really pushing for a lot of changes at law firms, which I think is terrific, because that's really the only way things are going to change. So they're pushing for things like making sure that that your attorneys are diverse. And they're actually sending surveys to their law firms and ensuring that their client teams are diverse, both from a gender perspective, LGBT perspective, lawyers of color perspective. So that, I think, is a real positive, I think, for the profession, because that's how things are going to change. And I also think there's lots of lawyers tend to be, and even more so now, tend to be people who want to give back to the community. And I've found that over my career, I think there are more and more law firms, in-house counsel, government lawyers who are giving of their time on a pro bono basis to do legal services for low-income clients, which I think is a real positive too. So those are two positive things that have changed.
Thank you. I do want to make sure we have time for questions. So I would like us to pause now, and does anyone have any questions? I believe there's a microphone that we would like you to use if you have questions. Anyone? Excellent. I was going to say, I'm surprised if you come here on a Friday afternoon all this time and someone doesn't have a question.
So I had a question, someone was talking before about how loans was a big factor in deciding between public and private sector. Was that really the only thing that you is that the main thing that you thought of when you decided, or is there something else that really made you go to one side or the other?
I think loans is a big thing, but today
it's very different.
There are a lot of opportunities out there. Both law firms there are some law firms that sponsor like scholarships, and they hire somebody or who then goes and works at legal aid, and yet they get paid the law firm's salary. And it's the way that the law firm satisfies its pro bono requirements, and also it enables that person to go do the public interest work and still be able to pay back his or her loans. And there are other loan forgiveness programs through law schools as opposed to law firms.
From the federal government.
And the federal government has this amazing program that wasn't around. It's just really recent. It's incredible.
It wasn't around
Yeah,
when
it's
I
incredible.
Brand new.
graduated,
This
or
was a
brand
part of Obama's reforms of the
And you
student
can
loan
do whatever
system.
and
Yeah.
pay as much as you can. So that, I think, is going to be, that's a seismic shift. So you don't necessarily need to make those kind of calculations in your head really anymore if you opt to do some of the listed, work in legal services or even work in the DA's office, and then you can pay a certain percentage of your salary.
Yeah,
That, I think, is going to
15%.
be,
It
15%, I
was
think it is.
15, I believe they've now just dropped it to 12 of what, it's a complicated calculus, which is based on the poverty line times 3. But let's suffice to say, what you're asked to pay is because it's tied to your income, you actually can, pay rent and perhaps go to a movie now and again and not just eat ramen noodles and if what you want to do is public interest and make a low salary. I will say, though, that certain changes in the legal market overall, in the sense of there's been a bit of a shrinking legal market, or at least a static number of legal jobs, but yet more and more graduates of law schools, that what has happened is that the competition for jobs out of law school has become so great that there are people who now it's become, even in things like public defender's offices, legal aid, NGO work, things where those entities used to have to really try hard to fill those slots on it because of, for instance, salary issues or something like that. Now people work for them for free for 6 months or a year in order to even then be able to apply for a full-time job where they are paid at that lower salary. There is just so much competition for jobs. And so that is, so there's a give and take. It's great news that there is these loan forgiveness options, but you can't, if you can't even get a job, then the loan forgiveness may not help. And there are lots of statistics that are available out there if you are considering going to law school. The different schools have to report how many of their students are employed at graduation, employed 9 months after graduation. Also, starting only very recently, and it's surprising that this only happened recently, they're now reporting whether if their students are employed at graduation or at 9 months out, are employed in jobs that require a law degree. Because if someone, for instance, said, I work, as a bank teller or a job that has nothing to do with their law degree, if they had a job and collected a paycheck, the schools would report that as being employed. And so that could lead to some deceptive statistics. And so that is something that there's been a lot more transparency on, and would be something that I would encourage those who are looking into law school to consider when choosing a school.
And I think, again, with all of these new programs, it has become more possible to do whatever you're interested in, no matter where you go to school or what your debt load is. I think, for me, it was a little bit of a, gosh, that monthly payment is rather large sort of moment. I mean, I had done the calculation, but I guess I hadn't thought it through as much as I should have. But I don't want to imply that you can't work in public interest. Lots of people do. I think what I would suggest is really thinking about, if you know that you are someone who's going to want to work in public interest law, if you know that you want to live in a small town, or you want to have 6 children, or you want all of those things, then at least give some consideration to which school you choose, or how much debt you take on, or which loan program might help you do those things. Or consider alternative law school programs. Before the nonprofit that I worked for closed down, I was actually looking into an evening program where I could have continued working part-time and gone to law school part-time, and that would have been a very financially viable option. So there are lots of ways to do things, but at least give some thought to it.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that.
And don't assume that you will just walk out of law school and land $150,000, $200,000 a year job.
Yeah, I mean, I'm now in charge of hiring, and it's really depressing, actually. I get these amazing
And you
resumes.
have my dream job, I think.
And I see these amazing resumes of people who have sung at Carnegie Hall, and they're, Eagle Scouts, and, they went to India and saved young children, and I can't give them a job, because there are 500 other people that we're looking at. So it's a really tough market. And so I wouldn't dissuade you from going to law school, because I really love being a lawyer, and I think it's a great thing to do.
And I
But-
loved law school.
Yeah, I didn't like law school that much. I didn't love law school, let's put it that way. But that's okay. But I think that you have to be thoughtful about it before you go. You have to know what you're getting into, so.
Yeah.
Well, you've already pre-answered my next question, which is
Oh, good,
which is
because we only have a minute.
look at this. I'm very patient. Would you do it again? So I think
Yes.
yes is all around.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would encourage you to go.
Yeah. And I wanted to make a point of asking this question only because I know we've perhaps talked about certain negatives, but I think that if you actually talk to nearly any practicing lawyer, they will talk about some very great positives as well. So there's a balance.
And they choose to stay. I know a large number of attorneys that are voluntarily working into their 80s and 90s because they enjoy coming into the office and doing the work. Now, they're not necessarily working 100 hours a week anymore, but
And I think another very rewarding aspect of being a lawyer, even if you're not in a public interest job, and you are at a big firm, and you may be thinking that all those people do is work for big corporate clients and care about money, there's a high degree of satisfaction in advising people and solving their problems, regardless of who the client is. And I think that keeps people who become lawyers genuinely care about helping individuals, helping their communities, getting involved in community policy changes, school boards, all the way on up, obviously, to legislatures at the state and federal level. And that kind of return on the investment is really, I think, invaluable from a personal satisfaction point of view.
Are there any other questions? My goodness, we ended on time. Well, with that, I do, again, want to thank you. I want to thank Dartmouth, the Rocky Center, the Center for Women and Gender Studies, Bruce, who spoke on our previous panel, everyone who's participated in the events the last few days, and all of you for coming. So thank you.